Coming straight at you from deepest, darkest East Texas. This is the Tony DeGonia podcast. So find you a spot where you get good signal, grab you some sweet iced tea, turn up your headset, because we're jumping in with both feet to the Tony DeGonia podcast. Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Tony DeGonia, your host for Tony DeGonia Podcast. This is episode number 6 for the podcast. However, this is also episode number 1 for Cyber Simplified, our web series on the worst attacks to happen in the last 10 to 15 years on businesses and nation states, different things like that across the world. As promised, today we're going to talk about STUXNET. STUXNET was amazing. It was something else. We're going to cover a few things straight out, get a few things straight out of the way. For you techies out there, STUXNET, the name origination for STUXNET, the original name was given by Virus Block ADA as rootkit.tmp hider. Symantec, however, called it w32.temphid, later changing it to w32 STUXNET. Its current name is derived from a combination of some keywords in the software, .stub and mrxnet.sys. And they took those two words, put them together, and we got STUXNET. STUXNET was a zero-day attack. Now, for those of you who are non-technical in the audience, you're probably saying, what, Tony, what in the world is a zero-day attack? So a zero-day exploit is an attack that exploits previously unknown security vulnerabilities. A zero-day attack, sometimes defined as an attack that takes advantage of security vulnerability on the same day that the vulnerability becomes generally known. Basically, it's an attack that takes place before anybody really knows that there's a vulnerability there, before there's any antivirus signatures, things like that written for it. We call that a zero day, and it can be pretty nasty. In another episode, we'll be going over, just how long it takes for a lot of security companies to come up with signatures for those zero-day attacks, things like that. The next question is, how did STUXNET get transmitted? STUXNET was a computer worm, and it was malware. And as malware, it was on an infected USB flash drive. It could spread to a Windows computer through zero-day exploits. Then it could spread to other flash drives that were subsequently connected to the computer. The question of the hour is, who made STUXNET? Who made the STUXNET virus? Well, whistleblower Edward Snowden told a German magazine that Israel and the United States created the STUXNET computer virus that destroyed nuclear centrifuges in Iran, and he told them that on July 9th, 2013. Now, a lot of people, we hear a lot about Edward Snowden and all the things he's done and how he's went out and hid from prosecution from the U.S. and things like that. And while I'm not a huge fan of Edward Snowden, He knows a few things. He released a lot of information that was, some say it's top secret, some say it's not. I'm not going to get into that controversy, but there have been a lot of things that he's leaked that have been found to be true. So I had to go through several articles. I did a lot of research on this because I wanted to make sure that I was giving you guys the facts. And so I researched it. I researched it through CNET. I researched it through CSO magazine. I researched it through Stanford University and a couple of other places. This thing was international news, but it was a top secret mission. No one wanted to take the blame for it or take credit for it. The U.S. didn't want to. However, eventually someone kind of did. And they did it in a way that still left some mystery. STUXNET was delivered to an Iranian nuclear plant on a thumb drive, citing U.S. intelligence sources. ISS source says an infected memory stick was used to hit the facility with the worm that severely damaged Iran's nuclear program. An Iranian double agent working for Israel used a standard thumb drive carrying a deadly payload to infect Iran's Natanz nuclear facility with a highly destructive STUXNET computer worm, according to a story by ISS source. Now, there are a few things to know about this. STUXNET was what they call a SCADA identifier, so it was able to look at everything within the facility. STUXNET quickly propagated through Natanz. It took the facility offline and at least temporarily crippled Iran's nuclear program. Once a user did nothing more than click on a Windows icon, the worm was discovered nearly 2 years ago. ISS sources report yesterday was based on the U.S. On sources inside the U.S. intelligence community. This is an older article that I got some of this information from, so it wasn't actually yesterday. It was 8 to 10 years ago. Sources who requested anonymity because of their close proximity to the investigation said a saboteur at the Natanz nuclear facility, probably a member of the Iranian dissident group, used a memory stick to infect the machines there. They said using a person on the ground would greatly increase the probability of computer infection as opposed to passively waiting for the software to spread through the computer facility. Iranian double agents would have helped to target the most vulnerable spots in the system. One source said in October 2010, Iran's intelligence minister, Haydar Maslahi, said an unspecified number of nuclear spies were arrested in connection with STUXNET.33 virus. As CNET first reported in August 2010, STUXNET as a worm intended to hit critical infrastructure companies was meant to remove data from Natanz, or wasn't meant. Let me repeat that. It was not meant to remove data from Natanz. Rather, it left a back door that was meant to be accessed remotely to allow outsiders to stealthily control the plant. The STUXNET worm infected industrial control system companies around the world, particularly in Iran and India, but also companies in the U.S. energy industry. Liam Omerchu, manager of operations for Symantec Security Response, told CNET he declined to say how many companies may have been infected or to identify any of them. This is quite a serious development in the threat landscape, he said. It's essentially giving an attacker control of the physical systems in an industrial control environment. According to ISS source, the double agent was likely a member of the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, MEK, a shadowy organization often engaged by Israel to carry out targeted assassinations of Iranian nationals, the publication sources said. As CNET reported in August 2010, the STUXNET worm propagates by exploiting a hole in all versions of Windows in the code that processes shortcut files ending in .lnk. According to the Microsoft Malware Protection Center, merely browsing to the removable media drive using an application that displays shortcut icons such as Windows Explorer will run the malware without the user clicking the icons. The worm infects the USB drives or other removable storage devices that are subsequently connected to the infected machine. Those USB drives then infect other machines, much like the common cold is spread by infected people sneezing into their hands and then touching doorknobs and others are handling. The malware included a rootkit. What is a rootkit? A rootkit is software which is designed to hide the fact that the computer's been compromised. Basically, it will install itself on a computer, and when you go to look for it, it'll look like a printer or a driver for an internal piece of hardware. It's very, very difficult to find and very, very difficult to uninstall. Other software that sneaks into computers by using digital certificates signed by two Taiwanese chip manufacturers that are based in the same industrial complex in Taiwan, Realtek and J Micron. According to Chester Wisniewski, senior security advisor at Sophos, it is unclear how the digital signatures are acquired by the attacker, but experts believe they were stolen and that the companies were not involved. That's really important because digital certificates are what computers use to decide if an application is real or if it's malware or if it's dangerous to your computer. And since they used certificates for the malware, it showed up as legitimate software. So when it did that, there weren't any issues with it auto-installing. When it auto-installed, it didn't require anybody to say yes or to click on anything for it to install. It was completely self-installing, and that's what made it so effective. Once the machine is infected, a Trojan looks to see if the computer it lands on is running the Siemens Symantec WinCC software. The malware then automatically uses a default password that is hard-coded into the software to access the control system's Microsoft SQL database. That's interesting because they basically went after one kind of hardware that ran a very specific software, and they knew everything about that software, when they wrote the when they wrote the driver for Stuxnet. So it made it in such a way that it was well planned, I guess is the easiest way to say that. From the next article, which was something I got from Stanford University, Stuxnet worm attack on Iranian nuclear facilities. This is a paper that was written by Michael Holloway on July 16th, 2015. It was submitted as coursework, Stanford University, Winter 215. And on the website, on my website, I have the article published here as well under TonyDeGonia.com/Stuxnet. You can actually see some of the diagrams that Mr. Holloway used to explain this. But the Stuxnet worm first emerged during the summer of 2010. At least that's what's believed. Stuxnet was a 500 kilobyte computer worm. So it's a very small program, 500 kilobytes. Your average program today is, anywhere from, 10 megabytes to multiple gigabytes. It infiltrated numerous computer systems. The virus operated in 3 steps. First, it analyzed the target Windows networks and computer systems. The worm, having infiltrated these machines, began to continually replicate itself, which means it recreated itself and hopped from machine to machine to machine. Next, the machine infiltrated the Windows-based Siemens Step 7 software. Remember, we were talking about Siemens with the last article that we were talking about. Once again, this was a specific attack on Siemens because Siemens was the largest maker, the prevalent maker of software to run centrifuges at the time. The Siemens software was and continued to be prevalent in industrial computing networks such as nuclear enrichment facilities. Lastly, by compromising the Step 7 software, the worm gained access to the industrial program logic controllers. Now, one second. Industrial program logic controllers are not necessarily software. They're hardware. These are chipsets on a motherboard that are there specifically for running the Siemens hardware. They're like processors, right? So the Step 7 software, the Siemens Step 7 software, controlled those logic boards or those logic controllers. Like I said, there's an illustration in Figure 1. The final step gave the worm's creators access to crucial industrial information, as well as giving them the ability to operate various machinery at the individual industrial sites. The replication process previously discussed is what made the worm so prevalent. It was so invasive that if a USB was plugged into an infected system, the worm would infiltrate the USB device and spread to any subsequent computer system that the USB was plugged into. So, for example, let's say that Joe, the guy who did maintenance on the Siemens system, came and was going to update the Siemens system with a patch or something. As soon as he plugged in the USB drive to run the patch, that USB drive became infected with Stuxnet. So what that means is everywhere he went, once it was infected, Stuxnet then replicated to that machine. and he never knew it was happening. So it was genius in the way it was designed, because, we're talking about a secure facility back in the days when everyone thought that USB drives were fairly safe and secure. And we taught a lot of people, I say the U.S. and the Israelis, according to the rumors, taught a lot of people just how dangerous USB drives are. Because that software, we're talking about the ultimate drive-by download. You plug in a USB drive to do a maintenance patch, and next thing you know, you have a ticking time bomb in your hand. It was crazy. The STUXNET effect on Iran. Over 15 Iranian facilities were attacked and infiltrated by the STUXNET worm. Now, what's funny about this is it could have been a single facility that was the target of the actual attack, but because of the way people work, if you had that one maintenance guy that was doing maintenance at one facility and he used the same thumb drive at every facility, well, that guy could have been guilty of spreading STUXNET all across Iran to all their facilities, and he would have never even known it. What a heck of a place to have a screw up like that in Iran, because once they figure out what it is and who is doing it, that guy's pretty well done for. You want to talk about a screw up of epic proportions. Wow. I don't even want to think about what happened to that guy. One of the affected industrial facilities was the Natanz nuclear facility. The first signs that an issue existed in the nuclear facility's computer system in 2010. Inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency visited the Natanz facility and observed that a strange number of uranium-enriching centrifuges were breaking. That was part of the attack. The cause of these failures was unknown at the time. Later in 2010, Iran technicians contracted computer security specialists in Belarus to examine their computer systems. The security firm eventually discovered multiple malicious files on the Iranian computer system. It has subsequently revealed that these malicious files were the STUXNET worm. Now remember, it self-replicates. So if they came in and plugged in any thumb drives, well, now they've got it on their thumb drives as well. Although Iran has not released specific details regarding the effects of the attack, it is currently estimated that the STUXNET worm destroyed 984 uranium-enriching centrifuges by current estimations. That constituted a 30% decrease in enrichment efficiency. That's huge. That's a 30% reduction in productivity from their uranium centrifuges. And listen, enriching uranium takes a long time. It's difficult. I've had it explained to me as I've told this story at trade shows and things in the past when I worked for a cybersecurity company. I was presenting on this very topic, and I had a gentleman from the crowd come up afterwards and tell me exactly how you enrich uranium, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of revolutions, and they have to be it's very, very, very precise. It's not like you're just throwing some uranium in a bucket and spinning it around. It's very, very precise. The Stuxnet worm origin speculation. Many members have speculated on who designed the Stuxnet worm and who's responsible for using it to essentially attack Iran's nuclear facility. It's currently agreed upon that this worm was designed as a cyber attack weapon, designed to attack the development of Iran's nuclear development program. However, the designers of the worm are still unknown. Many experts suggest the Stuxnet worm attack on the Iranian nuclear facility was a joint operation between the U.S. and Israel. Edward Snowden, as we talked about earlier, who was an NSA whistleblower, said that this was the case in 2013. Despite this speculation, there's still no concrete evidence as to who designed the original cyber weapon. Once again, this was an article that was written by Michael Holloway for Stanford University. And when you look at the website, TonyDeGonia.com/StuxNet, you'll see some references and some other links if you want to dig deeper in. So we'll go to our final story from CSO magazine. Chief Security Officer is what that stands for. And we'll just take a look because there's more information that will help you understand this even better. So the article starts off date sometime in 2010, but origins date to 2005. Impact. It was meant to attack Iran's nuclear power program, but will also serve as a template for real-world intrusion and service disruption of power grids, water supplies, or public transportation systems. That's the crazy thing about this malware, is that you can take the malware and you can change things in it, like the fact that it was attacking the Siemens Step 7, and you can change it. You can make it, give it the details to attack something else. And then you've got a real world, current day issue on your hand. The story. It's malware designed to target only Siemens SCADA systems damaged Iran's nuclear program by destroying 984 uranium enrichment centrifuges. The attack has been attributed to a joint effort by the U.S. and Israel, although never officially acknowledged as such. The story in CSO starts off, thanks to Stuxnet, we now live in a world where code can destroy machinery and stop or start a war. If you think about it, it's pretty serious. Stuxnet is an extremely sophisticated computer worm that exploits multiple previously unknown Windows zero-day vulnerabilities to infect computers and spread. Its purpose was not just to infect PCs, but to cause real-world physical effects. Specifically, its targets centrifuges used to produce the enriched uranium that powers nuclear weapons and reactors. Stuxnet was first identified by the InfoSec community in 2010, but development on it probably began around 2005. Despite its unparalleled ability to spread and its widespread infection rate, Stuxnet does little or no harm to computers not involved in uranium enrichment. When it infects a computer, it checks to see if that computer is connected to a specific model of PLC, or programmable logic controller, manufactured by Siemens. PLCs are how computers interact with and control industrial machinery like uranium centrifuges. The worm then alters the PLC's programming, resulting in the centrifuges being spun too quickly and for too long, damaging or destroying the delicate equipment in the process. While this is happening, the PLCs tell the controller computer that everything is working fine, making it difficult to detect or diagnose what's going wrong until it's too late. Who created STUXNET? According to this article, it's now widely accepted that STUXNET was created by the intelligence agencies of the United States and Israel. The classified program to develop the worm was given the code name Operation Olympic Games. It was begun under President George W. Bush and continued under President Obama. While neither government has ever officially acknowledged developing STUXNET, a 2011 video created to celebrate the retirement of Israeli Defense Forces head Gabi Ashkenazi listed STUXNET as one of the successes under his watch. So, you know, he kind of admitted it, in my opinion. But it's not official. No one really knows. It was just some guy who said, hey, this was a great success. Well, who knows? He could have been drinking. We don't know. But, you know, I'm thinking maybe. Anyway, while the individual engineers behind STUXNET haven't been identified, we know they were very skilled, and there were a lot of them. Kaspersky Labs' Roel Schoenberg estimated it took a team of 10 coders 2 to 3 years to create the worm in its final form. Several worms with infection capability similar to STUXNET, including those dubbed Dooku and Flame, have been identified in the wild. Although their purposes are quite different than STUXNET's, their similarity to STUXNET leads experts to believe that they are products of the same development shop, which is apparently still active. I would expect that it would be. So what is the purpose of STUXNET? The U.S. and Israeli governments intended STUXNET as a tool to derail or at least delay the Iranian program to develop nuclear weapons. The Bush and Obama administrations believed that if Iran were on the verge of developing atomic weapons, Israel would launch airstrikes against the Iranian nuclear facilities in a move that would have set off regional war. Operation Olympic Games was seen as a nonviolent alternative. Although it wasn't clear that such a cyber attack on physical infrastructure was even possible, there was a dramatic meeting in the White House Situation Room late in the Bush presidency, during which pieces of a destroyed test centrifuge were spread out on a conference table, and it was at that point that the U.S. gave the go-ahead to unleash the malware. STUXNET was never intended to spread beyond the Iranian nuclear facility at Natanz. The facility was air-gapped, meaning it had no internet going into it, so someone had to hand carry the thumb drive into the facility and not connected to the internet. That meant that it had to be infected via USB sticks transported inside by intelligence agents or unwilling dupes, but also meant the infection should have been easy to contain. However, the malware did end up on internet-connected computers and began to spread in the wild due to its extremely sophisticated and aggressive nature. Though, as noted, it did little damage to outside computers it infected. Many in the U.S. believed the spread was the result of code modifications made by the Israelis. Then Vice President Biden was said to be particularly upset about this. The STUXNET source code. Liam O'Murchu, who was the director of the Security Technology and Response Group at Symantec and was on the team there that first unraveled Stuxnet, says Stuxnet was by far the most complex piece of code that we've ever looked at, in a completely different league from anything we'd seen before. And while you can find lots of websites that claim to have the Stuxnet code available to download, O'Murchu says you shouldn't believe them. He emphasized to CSO that the original source code for the worm was written by coders working for the U.S. and Israeli intelligence, hasn't been released or leaked, and can't be extracted from the binaries that are loose in the wild. The code for one driver, a very small part of the overall package, has been reconstructed via reverse engineering, but that's not the same as having the original code. However, he explained that a lot about code could be understood from examining the binary in action and reverse engineering it. For instance, he says it was pretty obvious from the first time we analyzed this app that it was looking for some Siemens equipment. Eventually after 3 to 6 months of reverse engineering, we were able to determine, I would say, 99% of everything that happens in the code, O'Murchu said. And it was a thorough analysis of the code that eventually revealed the purpose of the malware. We could see in the code that it was looking for 8 or 10 arrays of 168 frequency converters each, said O'Murchu. You can read the International Atomic Association's documentation online about how to inspect a uranium enrichment facility. And in that document, they specify exactly what you would see in a uranium facility, how many frequency converters there will be, how many centrifuges there would be. They would be arranged in 8 arrays, and that there would be 168 centrifuges in each array. That's exactly what we were seeing in the code. It was very exciting that we'd made this breakthrough, he added. But then he realized what we had gotten ourselves into, probably an international espionage operation, and that was quite scary. Symantec realized this information in September 2010. Analysts in the West had known since the end of 2009 that the Iranians had been having problems with their centrifuges, but only now understood why. There is a Stuxnet documentary. Alex Gibney, the Oscar-nominated documentarian behind films like Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room, and Going Clear. He also directed 0 Days, which explains the history of Stuxnet's discovery and its impact on relations between Iran and the West. 0 Days includes interviews with O'Murchu and some of his colleagues and is available in full on YouTube. One dramatic sequence shows how the Symantec team managed to drive home Stuxnet's ability to wreak real-world havoc. They programmed a Siemens PLC to inflate a balloon. They infected the PC with its PC it was controlled by with Stuxnet. The result was dramatic. Despite only being programmed to inflate the balloon for 5 seconds, the controller kept pumping air into the balloon until it burst. The destruction of the Iranian uranium centrifuges, which follows the same logic, they were spun too quickly and destroyed themselves, was perhaps less visually exciting, but was ultimately just as dramatic. As the documentary explains, we now live in a world where computer malware code is causing destruction at a physical level. It's inevitable that we'll see more in the future. So, those are the end of the articles. Now, just a little bit of my take on the deal. We are already seeing STUXNET-like viruses in the real world. There have been several nation-state attacks going back and forth between, China and the U.S. And other countries. There have been some stuff going on with Russia. In the U.S., the whole voter thing that was going on last year. I believe it was last year with President Trump and all of that. I don't bring this up to get into politics because that's the last thing I want to do. I don't talk politics on my podcast. It's just not good for business. But what I will say is, this was a very well written piece of software, and more malware is being written in similar tones to STUXNET. In that they infiltrate an environment and they go after a very specific target, and they'll propagate across an entire network, servers, desktops, tablets, whatever accesses that network. And they can look for MAC addresses, which are the physical addresses of a particular network interface on a computer, tablet, anything, printer, everything that connects to a network has a MAC address. They can track IP addresses. They can track, model numbers. They can track any number of different things within a given network and then propagate to them. This was huge. We found this to be huge when I was working for my last company where we were doing IP CCTV and surveillance. That industry does not work very heavily in the cybersecurity world. Most cybersecurity companies kind of consider IP, CCTV, and surveillance to be IoT devices, right? Internet of Things type devices. So it seems like a lot of the security that's designed for IoT devices is all at the gateway type stuff. So once something gets in beyond the gateway, like a self-propagating application that comes in and gets plugged into a USB device, it's automatically defeated the gateway of the internet and is running rampant through a particular network. A lot of companies don't segregate their networks the way they should, so it's automatically gotten access to those fairly unprotected IoT devices or cameras or storage devices or whatever that particular piece of the network is that handles the IoT. I say that with the quote fingers. So there's huge cybersecurity issues, and there are companies out there that are trying to address that. They're addressing it by building virtual lands, for the IoT devices, or physically segregating IoT networks from production IT networks, and then segregating each type of production network. These things are all best practices, but there's got to be more done. And I think because of STUXNET, STUXNET's kind of the blueprint for attacks that have been happening from about 2012 or 2013 on until today. So for about the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of malware attacks similar to STUXNET that will infiltrate a target and sit there and propagate until it finds the exact machine that it wants to use to carry out its payload. So we have to be careful, because that's certainly developed into ransomware, and ransomware, once it gets to where it needs to go, usually to an Active Directory server or a storage server that's got all the data on it that a company may own, it then locks that up and says, if you want your data, you got to pay a ransom. Usually that's a few Bitcoins, which right now are, I think $7,000 or $10,000 a Bitcoin. I'm not sure what they are at the time of this recording, but it's expensive. There have been police departments that have been infected. The FBI said, hey, pay the ransom. That's the best you can do. The thing about STUXNET and the thing about attacks on industrial type facilities is I don't know that backups would really help a whole lot. Usually having a good backup of your data is the first thing that your average security guy is going to tell you that you should do. Make sure you've got a good backup. Make sure you've got a good firewall. Make sure you've got good antivirus. All of those things, right? That's all part of the cybersecurity guys, book of tricks to ensure that your network is secure. STUXNET, maybe it could be stopped, maybe it couldn't. I personally think that if you put STUXNET in a network, even with good antivirus, it's going to defeat it. I've heard that there are some versions of STUXNET that are on the internet now that have turned into polymorphic malware. Polymorphic malware, what it does is it will run as a certain type of malware until it gets into an environment and it kind of looks around and it says, okay, here's the environment I've got. Do they have antivirus for this kind of malware? And if they do, then it'll actually go back and change its source code or use a different piece of code to propagate until it finds the code that it can exploit the rest of the network with, because then it changes to a 0-day attack. The polymorphic side of it has driven an entire industry called advanced persistent threat detection. And then there's also another aspect of the IT industry, cybersecurity industry, called threat detection and response. It's not based on antivirus. It's not based on signature type. detection. It's all based on heuristic data, historical stuff. It's based on files that are stored, changes to the registry in a computer. All things that are very important that you keep an eye on. These are all things that we're able to, with the appropriate hardware in place in a given network, and the appropriate monitoring utilities within a network that we're able to watch for. Back when Stuxnet happened, we didn't have those utilities. We didn't have those tools at our disposal. If we had a firewall at all, which this particular facility, the Natanz facility was an air gap facility, so it didn't have any internet going into it anyway. So most likely they didn't have any sort of firewall or any sort of monitoring or anything like that going on a case-by-case basis, which, as little as they could have done with it, probably wouldn't have helped a whole lot at the time. Had it happened in 2010, there were some monitoring and remediation softwares that were out there that could have at least read log files and saw changes going on within the operating systems on each of the individual computers, that it could have seen those files getting installed, and then, alerted someone within the IT group that could have taken a look into it and saw that same file was getting installed in each one of the computers throughout the entire network. And it also would have been able to see that these files were being generated from a USB drive. However, it does take a lot of diligence to do that, and you'd have to be certain that those IT people in that particular facility, were actually diligent enough to make that happen. So anyway, here's the story of Stuxnet. We're sitting right at about an hour. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I had my take on it. These are the kind of things that really drive me as a security person, because I want to learn how to stop things like this. I want to learn how to help customers. Not that I would have necessarily helped the Iranians, being an American. It's just one of those things that's a geopolitical issue. Once again, not really going to get into that. But if it were a customer here in the U.S. that were having an issue, well, I would be all over it, of course. Once again, thanks for listening, and you guys have a great day, have a great week, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks a lot. Hey, thanks for listening to the Tony DeGonia podcast. Just a couple of things to remember. You can find us on our website at tonydegonia.com/podcast. On LinkedIn at linkedin.com/n/Tony DeGonia. On Twitter at Tony DeGonia. On Facebook.com/Tony DeGonia SE. You can also catch all of our episodes on iTunes, Google Play, and our website, of course, Podbean.com, Blueberry.com, and most other mainstream podcast outlets. And remember our mantra, be awesome because you are awesome. Thanks for listening. Hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll see you down the road.